Hi and welcome back. In our previous tutorial, we saw how to write a simple JSP and write some Java code in it. This kind of script tags and Java code inside script tags sometimes throw people off. We know that in Java, everything is a class. So if you're a Java veteran and you're new to JSPs, you might ask, what's happening here? Where is the class? There are a couple of experiments that we can conduct to understand this in a bit more detail. Let me do one small change here first. We have a method here inside the definition tag that I had explained earlier. What happens if I take this method and I remove that out and then I put it inside this tag itself? So this is a simple script tag. It's not inside a method definition tag. Now what happens? And you already see that Eclipse is throwing me an error, but I'll ignore it and press save. Let me try refreshing. There you go. We have an exception. And the exception is it returned as a status 500, which makes sense. This is how the web application handles it. Now, look at the error here. It says this syntax on token print brace is not expected. The semicolon is expected. So this is commonly found when you cannot define a method. So it's complaining that it cannot have a method definition here. It's having a problem with this open brace. Now, okay, now this is still one thing. Let me revert this back to how it was before. Yeah, so now we have this again. Now let's make sure that everything is fine. Yes, everything is back to how it was before. Now, there's one other thing that I can do here, and we'll first do that and we'll try to analyze how that works. Now, let me open up a new script tag. Again, I can open up as many of these as I want. I'll write a for loop here. To close this here. Now inside the for loop, I will say out dot println, and we put a break here. I equals. I'll just print the value of I. Save. Now when I refresh this, I see the value of I getting printed here, which is fine. But now I'll make one more change here. We know that the static value can be removed out. So I don't want to print this inside an out.println. So what I'll do is I will delete this line and I'll close this script tag. So inside the script tag we just have a for loop open, but it's not closed yet. So I'll have another script tag where the for loop is closed. There's a closing break. Remove this. Okay, so what I've done here is I have put two script tags, one where the for loop is open with an open flowery brace, and the other script tag with the for loop closed. This works. You know, the compiler sees this as the closing brace of this one. So now what's interesting is if I type some value here, let me put the same text here, and then I use the equal to I value, which is the person equals, where I'm printing out the value of I. Now notice what happens. It's still printing that. So let me make a change here so that we know the effect. Okay, there you go. So this is interesting. We have a script tag and we have Java code inside it. And now we have a simple HTML text. We also have this print where we are printing on the value here, but the Java code to close this for loop, which is this closing brace, is inside a different script tag. And the text in between these two script tags are getting executed as if it were a part of this Java code. So to explain these two behaviors, the first behavior is you cannot have methods inside these script tags, and the second behavior is you can have text in between script tags, and then they are actually treated as if they are a part of the Java code and the script itself. In order to explain these two behaviors, let me explain how the JSP actually works. Well, if you haven't guessed it already, it's the way it works is this JSP is actually converted to a class. So this whole test or JSP, see here, is actually converted to a Java class by Tomcat, and Tomcat executes this Java class. Now, what is a Java class that gets generated by this JSP? It's actually a servlet. So every JSP is actually a different way to write a servlet, and once you save the JSP and deploy it, Tomcat takes the JSP and then converts it into a servlet, and it's actually the servlet that runs. Now, if you had to write the same functionality inside a servlet, all these code, if you had to write it inside a servlet, how would you do it? You'd write all these inside a doGet method, obviously, because we are using a get method here, because we are not passing any values and it's not a post, so the default value is a get method. So that's exactly what Tomcat does as well. Every code inside a scriptlet is actually converted to code inside a doGet method. So it takes all this code, whatever you write inside a scriptlet, takes all these code and adds it to a doGet method that it generates for the servlet class that it generates for this JSP. Now, what happens to these static text that's coming up in between? The way Tomcat treats it is, say this BR, for example, or this text, the value of K is. So this has to directly go to the output. So how would you do it? You would obviously put it inside a out.println. The printwriter.println. So that's exactly what Tomcat does as well. It takes the print writer and then it passes all these text into the output stream, and that's how we get this output here. Now, you should be able to understand why we cannot put this method declaration inside the script tag, because all this code is going into a doGet. Now, if you put a method definition inside the script tag, then even the method definition goes inside a doGet. And that's the reason why we got the error here earlier saying that we cannot have a method definition, because obviously you cannot have a method defined inside another method. That's the reason why we put this other tag, which is a definition tag. Whatever code you put inside the definition tag stays outside the doGet, and this forms a separate method definition inside the class. Now let's have a look at the servlet that gets generated by this JSP. We can actually look that up inside the Tomcat folder. So let me open up the Apache Tomcat installation. Now Tomcat generates the servlets and deploys it in a temporary folder, which is different from the folder where we have our application where we've deployed it. So this temporary folder is called work, and this might be different depending on the version of Tomcat that you're using, but I think it should be called work anyway. So here we have our local host, and there we go. Here's a simple servlet project. And look at the package name that's given. It's org Apache JSP. And here you go. We have our test.jsp.java and test.jsp.class. So our test.jsp that we have written here has been converted to test_jsp.java, and it is in the org Apache JSP package. And it's also compiled it, and it has the test.jsp.class, and that's what's executing and rendering this output. So let's have a look at what test.jsp.java looks like. Okay, I've increased the font a bit here. So we can see there is this package which auto-generated. It's arg.apache.jsp. All our JSPs converted to servlets will have this package. Now, it has a few imports which is required. Again, these are servlet imports. And now you have a public final class test JSP. This is the name that we're going to get. It's the JSP name underscore JSP. That's the name of the servlet. And it extends a class called HTTP JSP base. We'll look at what this class is in a little while, but have a look at this. Now we have a method here. This method was there in our definition tag, and this method actually becomes a part of this class that's generated because of this JSP. Now let's look at a few other things here. We have an init and destroy. Let's not worry about that as of now. We have a service. Now this service acts as a common method for the do get and the do post, because here when we write our code inside the JSP, we are not actually telling Tomcat whether this has to be inside a do get or inside a do post. So what Tomcat does is, whatever code you put in the JSP, instead of putting it inside both the do get and the do post, because we don't know which one we are actually looking at, what it does instead is it puts inside this JSP service, and this JSP service forms a, it catches both the get and the post methods, and it does have all the code that we have written here. So here we have some initial text. Don't worry about that as of now. Here you can see it has the out.write, and this out.write is there for every static line that we have inside our JSP. So here you see we have a doc type, which is a static line. We have not come to this line yet, so just ignore it for now. We'll look at this in the next set of tutorials. But the static line, this is where it's actually no different from the HTML that we saw. See, this is the HTML, and this is the JSP. So these are all HTML code. So all these HTML code have been converted to out.write. So these are actually going as Java statements, and each one of these statements have been converted. They have even been escaped. As you can see here, there are escape characters that have been added wherever required, and they have been converted into simple Java statements. Now, the non-static code here, now after all this code, and of course the definition we've already seen, now after all this code, here is where the script starts. So these script statements are actually converted into direct statements inside the method, which is obvious because we want these to run. So no matter how many script tags you have here and code you have here, all these are going to get appended one after the other. And if you have static lines of code in between, they get converted to out.write. So this actually explains the other question that we had: how does this for loop work? So the way the for loop works is, this script tag gets directly converted to one line of code inside the method, which is a for loop initiation. This static code, this one, gets converted to out.write. So you can see here, all this gets converted to out.write. And then, when we are actually printing out this value of I, so it just has to print out the value of I. So here you go, it just does out.print of I, and then the remaining code, and then it catches, and then it has the closing brace for this for loop. So you have a few catch and finally blocks of code also, but let's not worry about that for now. So to get an overall idea, what's happening here is static code is being converted to out.write. The definition is being converted to methods inside the class, and then all these executable pieces of code inside the script tags are actually converted to code inside the service method, which gets executed on get and post.